Back on the sea, Lady Tilly is finally venturing out on her journey with this traveler. The blonde guy explains that there are countless islands in the bay, and no one has been this close to their border before. The further east they go, the stranger the weather becomes, and the islands stay the same, so he's not sure how peculiar they might get. Princess Tilly asks if he is implying that he never had been there before, despite his reputation as a renowned explorer. Few have dared to cross Inferno Island and continue east, and this blonde is allegedly one of them. The blonde laughs it off, saying those are just exaggerated tall tales he's heard about him many times before. While lighting up his cigar, the blonde explorer explains that brave souls from the bay head east every year. It's tough to discover something new because of violent hurricanes and sudden fogs that make sailing really difficult. Meanwhile, Ash reveals in her thoughts that this great explorer went missing 2 years ago. A lot of people thought he died in an accident, but he was actually at Slumber Island. He made naval maps and set out to find other ruins. Lady Tilly has decided to work with him to explore the ruins, and ever since she is working with him, this guy has never talked about the 2 years he was missing, and Tilly hasn't mentioned it either, even though she likely knows about his past. Meanwhile, Tilly explains that the hurricanes around here are actually quite terrifying. The adventurer agrees, adding that witches are absolutely amazing. He mentions that if it hadn't been for a witch named Molly, they would have been goners. Suddenly Molly's fishing rod gets hooked, and she exclaims that there's a big fish caught on her line. The adventurer is still amazed by how Molly summoned that huge shield yesterday to protect their ship. He notes that his crew has stopped resenting witches because of it. So, in a way, the hurricane turned out to be a blessing. He reveals that he's always thought witches would make the best explorers in the world. Tilly happily states that there's already one witch who's known as the greatest explorer. The adventurer seems to agree, and it sounds like they might be talking about lightning. Meanwhile, Molly hooks another fish, and this one looks even bigger than the last. The guy standing nearby is absolutely stunned by what's about to come out of the water. As soon as Molly turns around, a weird sea monster with thousands of sharp teeth lunges at her, aiming to devour her in one gulp. But Ash is quick to act, diving in with her giant sword and slicing the monster clean in half. She tells everyone to back off, then charges forward with her sword, slashing the remaining monster with lightning speed and killing it in one swift strike. After dealing with the sea monsters, Ash checks in on Molly to make sure she's okay. Molly reassures her that she's fine. Ash then turns to the adventurer, asking about these monstrous sea creatures. The adventurer explains that these monsters are legendary sea devils. They're notorious for disguising themselves as regular fish, just so they can trick the fishermen to pull them aboard. There's a myth that if they eat humans, they grow arms, but it's all just hot air. In reality, they're known as demons. Tilly's eyes widen in shock at the mention of demons. Just then, one of the crew members notices that the fog has started to surround the area. The man, who is known as Thunder by the way, quickly shouts for everyone to lower the sails, because they're entering the phantom waters. Well, come to think of it, Lightning's dad is named Thunder too, and he's an adventurer just like her. Seems like we have finally found Lightning's father. Meanwhile, Thunder explains that as they get closer to Phantom Island, the same kind of demons they just hunted are going to pop up in even greater numbers. The fog, rocks, and other creatures make this place feel like a ghostly battlefield, which is why many explorers come here but few find the entrance to the ruins. Luckily, they don't have to worry about any of that right now, because Molly's jelly-like pet is guiding them safely. Thunder is once again amazed by how, no matter how chaotic the region gets, the pet always warns them of any danger ahead. Ash then asks if all of these islands are underwater, and Thunder confirms that they are, just like Slumber Island. However, the tide rises and falls much faster here, about once every half a month, and the speed is incredible. It's like there's a huge hole at the bottom that's sucking up all the nearby water. Thunder thinks the whole bay's wave activity is tied to this place. If they're lucky, they might see the main island popping up from the water. Princess Tilly asks why they don't just wait until the tide's all the way down, so they won't have to worry about hitting any rocks while sailing. Thunder replies that they can't wait because, when the tide goes out, they won't be able to see the Crimson Spectre River, which is the only way to get to the ruins. He points out a strange red hue in the water, and even the ladies are curious about it. Thunder explains that these are cardinal scale fish, unique to the Phantom Islands, and they'll soon see the Crimson Spectre River in its full glory. Princess Tilly lights up when she sees a huge swarm of fish. She finally gets it. The Crimson Spectre River isn't a real river at all, but just a bunch of cardinal scalefish swimming together. It makes it look like there's a crimson river below. Tilly asks why this happens. Thunder explains that it's because of the main island. Apparently, the island is shaped like a pyramid with a big hollow space inside. The fish lay their eggs there, and when the tide drops and the island starts to show up, the fish, sensing the change, go nuts and rush out. As long as they stick to the Crimson Spectre River, they'll make it to their destination. After sailing along the Crimson River for a while, the majestic Phantom Island finally comes into view, leaving everyone in awe. One of the crew guys quickly ties up the boat to a boulder. As everyone hops out, Princess Tilly asks if he's the one who set up the posts for parking the ships. Thunder explains that the posts were already here when he first found the place, and they were probably put up by whoever built the ruins. Lady Ash then asks where the ruins are, and Thunder says they're right above them, so they'll need to head up to reach them. As they walk through the spooky place, Thunder warns everyone that there are booby traps meant to keep looters out. But since the traps have been submerged for so long, he guesses they might not work anymore. The only issue is they have a long hike ahead, so they need to be careful not to run out of stamina. Princess Tilly seems pretty creeped out by the eerie pathway. Seems like Tilly isn't a fan of the dark. But luckily, Lady Ash has always had her back and is ready to guide her through the shadows once again. After crossing the narrow pathway, they finally reach a door. When they open it and step inside, they get their first look at the library from within. As Tilly starts exploring, Ash quickly tells her to stop, warning that it might be dangerous. But Thunder reassures them, saying they don't need to worry because he and his team have already explored this place before. He points out that there's nothing much in here except some stone tables and chairs, because they've already collected all the magic stones, which were scattered all over the floor, about 30 in total. Plus, other explorers have been through here too, so he's pretty sure the place has been cleaned out. But it looks like Tilly isn't giving up. She spots something secret on the wall and starts ripping it off. To everyone's amazement, she uncovers a huge magic stone embedded in the wall. Ash quickly decides to pull it out, but Lily tells him not to. Instead, she approaches the crystal, and crimson magic energy begins to radiate from it. As the energy intensifies, red energy starts bursting out of the crystal. That's when Thunder realizes that Tilly might be trying to unlock something that only witches can activate. The other crew members are completely clueless about what's happening, and before shit takes turn for the worst, Lady Ash steps in, grabs Tilly like a toddler, and starts running out of the mess. At the same time, a staircase suddenly drops down to the ground from above, supported by some sturdy chains. Thunder's mind is hit by a bolt out of the blue as he sees the staircase before his eyes, probably leading to a secret room. Everyone quickly ascends the stairs, and when they reach the top, Princess Tilly finds another stone embedded in the wall, and this one looks like an ice crystal you will find in the Everwinter Kingdom. Thunder is also amazed and points out that a stone this size could be worth a lot on the market. Tilly assures him that he'll get his share of the loot, just as they agreed. After walking around a bit more, they realize this new place is an abandoned living space. There are some books here too, but even Tilly, who's usually pretty sharp, has trouble reading them because the language is unfamiliar. She decides to take the whole treasure trove of knowledge with her, as they had planned. Thunder then checks out the telescope, but all he sees is pitch black. It's probably because it's broken. Princess Tilly calls Ash over to help move a heavy bronze plate. When Ash pushes it aside, they discover another stone underneath. Tilly immediately reaches out to it, and the stone reacts by glowing with a thick crimson light. Princess tells her friend that the stone is continuously drawing in her magic, and quickly Ash tells her to step back. But the princess reveals that it's already too late, and insists she just needs a little more time to finish the process. Things take a turn for the worse as the ground starts shaking, and Thunder begins coughing badly. His eyes fall on the telescope again, and out of curiosity, he makes a bad mistake of looking through it, which leaves him absolutely boggled when he sees a huge door that seems to be connected to the depths of hell itself. Back in the border town, we see the prince holding a letter sent by his sister and delivered by our little pigeon girl. In the letter, Princess Tilly writes that since his brother is also helping the witches, it's clear that the church has become their enemy. She reveals that she's a witch too, which might not surprise him since it's the only reason the other witches trust her. In a nutshell, she's glad that he's earned the witches' trust with his kind heart, instead of treating them like tools, unlike those nobles. She's also excited about all the inventions he's made, As a gesture of goodwill and to build a strong relationship between both parties against the church, she's included a list of supportive witches in her letter. He can choose those he needs the most and have Maggie let her know. She also warns him she won't be sending more than 5 witches, so he'd better sort out a good transportation plan. The church is greedy and will eventually try to take over all 4 kingdoms, so she hopes he's ready to fight them when the time comes. She'll also give full support to help push back against the church and make a world where witches aren't discriminated against. With that sweet note, that's how the letter wraps up. The prince thanks the pigeon girl for delivering the letter and tells her that Lightning has already gone to the king's city with the ships and should be back in a few days. In the meantime, she can either hang out with Nana or Leaf if she wants to play, or she can take a bath and get some rest. Just as he's getting back to his work, he's jolted by a commotion outside. He's freaking out, hoping his territory isn't under attack. But when he looks outside, he sees the chemistry lab is on fire. The prince rushes to the lab, and when he gets there, the lab assistant begs him to save their teacher, who's really hurt and might not make it. Roland calms everyone down, saying he's already sent someone to help and they'll be here in a few minutes. In the meantime, he wants to check on the teacher. The old alchemist's face is badly beaten up, and both Knight Carter and the prince have a hard time swallowing their shock when they realize his injuries are from the acid released by the explosion. The doctor says they've already done some first aid and stopped the bleeding, but she's worried his injuries might be beyond help. Not wasting any time, the prince quickly tells his guard Sean to bring Nana in as soon as possible, and Sean responds immediately. The prince decides to check out the scene with Carter and reminds the guard again to bring Nana back quickly. They walk into the lab, and it's a total disaster. The prince tells Carter not to touch anything unless he's wearing anti-corrosion gloves. The prince notices a bottle nearby and finds it odd that it's there. He picks it up and realizes it looks like a bottle of spirit from the village market, with less than half left. He wonders if this mad alchemist might actually be a booze-loving old coot, just like our Rick Sanchez. Just then, the soldier arrives and announces that Nana has arrived. Without wasting any time, the prince directs Nana to tend to the alchemist's injuries. Nana confidently declares that small wounds like these are no problem for her. She activates her abilities, and the alchemist's face begins to heal. The skin on his fingers, which had been severely damaged, starts to recover and come together. It's pretty surprising that Nana is actually healing the alchemist's missing fingers, especially since she wasn't able to do this before. Even the soldier is a bit puzzled because there were 3 fingers missing before, but now everything is healed up. The prince asks Nana since when she's been able to do this. In response, the girl explains that she discovered this ability about a week ago. She was experimenting with chickens and realized she didn't need the severed limbs to patch them up once again with body. If she focused enough magic, the lost limbs would slowly grow back by themselves. She proudly mentions that she can pull up this miracle thanks to what the prince taught her in class about the human body being composed of cells. Injuries or amputated limbs are like lost cells, and since magic can fix these losses, she was sure that it should work for amputated limbs too. It's a bit mana-draining task, but growing back a finger is manageable, while regenerating an entire arm is more challenging. Once the alchemist is fully healed, he opens his eyes and jolts awake. He quickly reports that he has finally created what the prince assigned him to make. Curious, the prince asks if he's talking about mercury fulminate. The alchemist confirms with a frantic yes. He explains that the missing catalyst turned out to be alcohol. At first, he tried dozens of different ingredients, but none of them worked. After this streak of bad luck, he bought some alcohol to lift his spirits, and remembered from the chemistry book that alcohol is an organic product and an important ingredient for some reactions. He extracted the alcohol from the spirit and conducted a new test, which surprisingly succeeded on the 6th try. He rambles on about some scientific details that aren't crucial right now. In a nutshell, while experimenting with alcohol, he accidentally had a blast, not the fun kind, but a pretty brutal one. Prince is pretty happy for the discovery, but he is also pretty sad and tells the alchemist to don't pull these kind of risky stunts for the next time, because he is not Rick. The prince tells the old alchemist that if it weren't for Nana, he'd be dead by now. The alchemist's eyes light up in amazement, and he asks if witches can heal wounds caused by experimenting. When he hears the answer, he goes completely wild with joy, excited that he can now experiment without worrying about dying. The prince and Nana are a bit lost on how to handle the frenzied old man. But then, Roland's mind starts racing about their successful experiment, which leaves him grinning from ear to ear because he's got a great idea for making a bullet cartridge's primer, all thanks to the mercury fulminate discovery. But before he can dive into his exciting experiments, the prince has some boring ruler duties to handle, and he's not too thrilled about it. Just when the prince was hoping for some free time to experiment, a letter arrives from Longsong Fortress about a plague hitting the entire fortress. He also has to check in on Anna and the smith's shop. After finally managing to find some time, he sits down to respond to his sister. Meanwhile, the ships from the king's city have finally arrived. In his letter, the prince writes that he's thrilled about their alliance and is determined to destroy the church at all costs. He promises to expand his territory to allow witches to live freely, and is excited about the new witches arriving next month. He's also mapped out a safe route from the fjords to the border town to avoid the church and ensure a secure journey for the witches. He assures his sister that he'll teach the witches the basics once they arrive at the border town, and every witch who evolves will boost their chances of defeating the church. Lastly, he includes the names of the 5 witches he's picked and hopes to see them soon. The first is Lotus, with earth formation powers. The second is Cande, specializing in state preservation. The third is Evelyn, with alcohol transmutation. The fourth is Honey, a beast handler. And the fifth is Sylvie, known as the Eye of Magic. Once he finishes the letter, he tells Nightingale to get some rest, as everyone is exhausted from the trip to Longsong Fortress to fight the plague. It seems Nightingale is still troubled by something, so the prince asks if it's about the witch she killed in the king's city. Nightingale admits that she didn't want to kill her, but the witch was radiating such intense malice that she knew the only way to stop her was to take her life. The prince reassures her, saying that shit happens, and it's not her fault. He explains that since she was raised by the church, she likely saw everyone as traitors, and changing that mindset would be extremely difficult without years of interaction. Not only that, he also gives her credit for saving Wendy's life. Nightingale nods and acknowledges that she's done her best to save her other sisters, and that's what matters to her. Seeing her resolve, the prince is fascinated that she's moved past it instead of dwelling on it. Then Nightingale tries to ask a question, and the prince asks what it is. She asks if he's been doing anything with Anna while everyone was away in the king's city. The question catches the prince off guard, and he meekly asks what she's implying. He explains that he's been busy with the refugees and hasn't had much time alone with Anna, so he hasn't been clapping with her. It seems he forgot that Nightingale can see through lies, and she isn't shy about pointing that out. Then, in a surprising move, she kisses him deeply. After their intense lip lock, she says that if the prince wants to be with Anna, she's okay with it. All she wants is to stay by his side. The prince, completely embarrassed, blushes and smiles faintly. With those final words, Nightingale begins to dissolve into her fog, leaving the prince alone.